Yes, Mr. Okay, I've got 6 o'clock. Are we ready to roll?
Recording in
I would
progress.
like to call to order the City of Trinidad, California, City Council meeting for April 14th, 2026. And we are returning from closed session, but there is nothing to report from that closed session. So we'll go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance, please. And allegiance to the flag, United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. The next item will be approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any questions from the council regarding tonight's agenda or any changes you'd like to make? Okay. Any comments or questions from the public regarding tonight's agenda? Right, bringing it back to the council then, I'll go ahead and move to approve tonight's agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, so moved. I should probably mention to Councilor Tuttle is not with us this evening, but we have a quorum with the 4 of us. In fact, we would have a quorum of 3, but I'll just point that out. Okay, and then approval of the minutes from the March 10th meeting. Any questions from council? No. Okay. Any questions or comments on the minutes from the March 10th meeting from the public, members of the public? Okay, seeing that, I'll bring it back to the council for a motion.
I'll move that we approve the March minutes.
Second. Okay, seconded by Councilor Breckenridge. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So moved. All right, next up are council reports and committee assignments. I'll start from my right tonight.
Okay, Redwood Regional Economic Development Commission finally had its meeting. It's the first one this year. And Mayor Kelly asked me to look into the possibility of trying to see if there's possible remuneration for the revenue loss from the intermittent water problem we had there early in January. Come to find out, early January was a tough month for Humboldt County. You know, they had king salmon flooded and they lost 40 homes over there where they were compromised. 40 homes were compromised, the residents. And then, of course, the Arcata fire. So the fire burned down half the block there in Arcata. And then we had our water problem. So it was kind of a good time to bring this all up. But to answer the question whether or not there's any remuneration, not as of yet. However, there is an assembly bill that's being sent through the assembly right now. I think it was submitted in February to address some of these shortcomings for small rural communities like Trinidad that don't necessarily meet the threshold for FEMA funding or SBA funding because of the thresholds that are set so high. And so we kind of fall under that threshold and we don't get the funding. So anyhow, there's an assembly bill going through right now that's EDC drafted a letter. We all signed it. There's 12 districts within the city itself. And I joined that, so we partook in that. Two other things. One, the EDC, was happy to announce we started air service going to Seattle just last week. And that was a long process, drawn out process that they finally got through. And I tell you what, this little community airport we have here is probably a crown jewel. I mean, sometimes we forget about how good we have it here in Humboldt County, but I've, as a airline pilot that's flown to Hong Kong, Buenos Aires, Paris, and all those places in between, this little airport we have here, this is a crown jewel by anybody's imagination. Not too big, not too small, but now we got service to Seattle, we got service to Denver, we got service to San Francisco. Life is good when it comes to the aviation side. You can get to Trinidad by sea, air, or land now, right? You got a boat, you can come in through Trinidad Harbor.
Yeah.
And the last thing, they need the JPA agreement. That's all I had.
Great, thank you. Councilor Brecken, I don't think I've report. No. Okay. And
Yes, I attended the March HCOG meeting on behalf of the city, and there were a couple of interesting things did there. The first was had to do with our regional housing needs allocation. The RENA process was we'll hear a little bit more about under our planners report, but the city of Eureka felt like it wasn't being treated exactly fair under the methodology that HCOG had come up with. So they appealed our decision, and that was heard and considered. The appeal was denied. It was when I understood where they were coming, and the issues they brought up will try to be addressed at administrative level during the next cycle. Yeah. And the other interesting thing was McKinleyville Community Services District was granted a seat on the technical advisory committee that filters a lot of things up to each club. They're the first community services district in the county that was granted that status. So those were the main things then. My report.
thank you. I just attended the HMRA, the hazardous waste group yesterday, and it was just it was a short meeting, just to approve budget, and we reviewed the training that happened last quarter. So it's not a lot to report out from there. Any questions from the council about the committee reports? I have a comment. I'm actually very excited that we can go to Seattle. We used to only be in the South. It's like it definitely filled the gap. Any questions or comments from the community or members of the public about the committee report?
Well, I'm Ian McDougall in the 254 North West Haven. My wife and small children are here tonight because they feel like our land's not safe.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to apologize for 1 second.
Yeah.
So we're discussing the council reports at this time.
Oh, I thought it was the public meeting. I mean,
We're not quite to items from.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
But I'm going to have you up first.
Okay, thank
As soon
you.
as we get there.
All right.
I apologize for having to interrupt. I just want to make sure that we get through the public safety report.
Sorry.
No worries. Any questions from the public regarding the council reports or committee reports? Okay, so back to the council. There's no need for approval. We're just accepting the report. But I do want to move on and quickly to the public safety report, and then we'll go to items from 4.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do not, John McCall is not with us tonight, I believe.
Okay.
I reached out, I did not hear back. As far as the stats that have been included in the meeting packet, I am, want to say that happy to report there were not many. Most of them were medical. There were quite a few calls are recorded for patrol checks. So when I look at the reports, approximately 3 to 1 are from county versus inside city limits. All the inside city limit stats that highlighted come from the county sheriff's office reports that they generate for us on a monthly basis. They do incorporate the 95570 zip code in general, but I'm always pleased to see I do nothing too extreme. A lot of routine calls, again, medical patrols, and typically incidents that occur at the entrance of town, where I think we're all familiar with that. Disruptive behavior and so on. So nothing too exciting to report. And then
Any questions for Dave about or any questions on the report? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on then to items from the floor. And I'd like you to invite Ian to come up first.
I'm not that good at public speaking, I'm sorry.
You're doing great.
It's been a really long week.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just gonna read this and get it over with. Okay. Me and Meg Google live at 254 Northwest Haven. My wife and small children aren't present because we feel like our house isn't really safe right now. We have like a power pole that's kind of on the freeway side that's basically being held up by branches. And I'm the direct neighbor from the Yurok Indian Housing Authority development on West Haven. We believe a direct result of the clearing and cutting of the neighboring land, the landscape, wind dynamics around our home have changed. We are now facing increased exposure, water, wind, and have concerns about the stability of the remaining tree. Our goal is to highlight these changes and their impacts on our property safety going forward. Also, we would welcome city officials and experts on trees and soil to come on to the property and see exactly what happened. Also, what is likely to happen in the next wind rain event. We appreciate your timely action on our concerns. I'd like my wife and children to come home and feel safe, and basically, that's it.
Thank you very much.
I have one other concern too. My wife wanted me to say this. Gosh, so she can't be here. This is regarding the Yurok Indian Housing Authority development on West Haven. It appears that they cut more than half an acre, 0.5 acres of trees allowed in the staff report. The trees removed were clear cut and not selectively cut. I understand they are scheduled to remove one more large tree. I suggest they leave the tree and alter the entrance and exit appropriately. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Other items from the floor? And again, for those of you who don't know, these are things that are not on tonight's agenda, so we won't be having a lot of discussion back and forth tonight. They may be agendized in the future, however, so please.
Hello, my name is Karen Parker. I live at 207 North West Haven, across the street from the Yurok development. My letter, and I'll give you copies of these. Wait for the record. Dear members of this Trinidad City Council and representatives of the Yurok Indian Housing Authority, we wish to formally raise concern regarding forestry operations conducted under the CAL FIRE conversion exemption associated with the nearby land. A conversion exemption under California forestry practice rules is not a waiver of responsibility. Under 14 CCR 1104.1, all operations remain fully subject to California forest practice rules, including protections against soil disturbances, erosion, drainage damage, and harm to neighboring properties. The registered professional forester and the landowner remain legally responsible for ensuring compliance. Tree falling must be conducted with direct control to avoid unreasonable damage to adjacent property, soil productivity, water quality, and existing vegetation. Likewise, removal of the stumps and root system is a not automatic fire, but must be taken into consideration when there's soil disturbances and erosion hazard. If forestry activities have caused damage to neighboring lands, drainage system, fencing, trees, or created unsafe conditions, both the forester supervising the work and the property owner should be held liable for violations of the forest protection rules and any resulting property damage. We respectfully request that the City Council and the Yurok Indian Housing Authority recognize them and enforce accountability for these violations have occurred and ensure that responsible parties are required to remedy damages caused. Respectfully, Kenneth Humboldt.
Thank you. Are there other items from the floor at this time? Please.
Hi, Anna Davis, from the Trinidad Chamber of Commerce. I wanted to let everybody know, reaching out to businesses, but I've heard individuals are also interested. We're starting summer camp scholarship for students that might help attending summer camp in town. So it's local students. It's for the Big Lagoon Camp, the Moonstone Camp, and the Green Lab Camp. We already have sponsors for 2 of those. As businesses in the chamber, we also using some of our top money to support that. But I did want to encourage anybody who's here or the community listening that if you want to reach out to us at the chamber, we're happy to have more support for Pacific students. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Other items from the floor? All right, thank you, everyone. We appreciate the input. And at this point, we are going to move on to the consent agenda. I bring council any changes or edits to tonight's consent agenda? Anything you'd like to pull for discussion? No? Okay. Any members of the public that would like to see the council hold something from the consent for discussion? I don't see anything excitement to pull anything from the consent, so I will go ahead and make a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Second.
And there's a second from John. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right, let's move on then to tonight's first discussion action item, which is Proclamation 2026-01, acknowledging April 2026 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I will turn it over to staff for an introduction to tonight's speaker on this topic.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I was reached out to, in I guess it was late March, by the North Coast Rape Crisis Team, Mel Pena, I believe. Mel is here. Wonderful. I haven't had a chance to meet her yet in person, so I'm meeting her tonight as well as I am. And this is a really important recognition that Mel, I'm going to let Mel go ahead and introduce this topic to you. And I believe we could also read the proclamation. She has a moment to say a few words.
Yeah, so my name is Mel. I am an advocate with the North Coast Rape Crisis Team. April is Sexual Assault Awareness Month, and I also wanted to let you guys know that we are facing some pretty severe budget cuts. We're expecting about 50% of our funding to go away at the end of the quarter, which is October, fiscal year, which is October. And we do have our annual gala that's happening on May 2nd at the Arcata Community Center.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I'll go ahead and read the proclamation unless you'd like to. So this is City of Trinidad Proclamation 2026-01 in recognition of Sexual Assault Awareness Month, April 2026. Whereas sexual violence affects children, youth, adults, and elders of all genders from all racial, cultural, and economic backgrounds with public health, social justice implications for every person in Trinidad. Whereas staff and volunteers of the North Coast Rape Crisis Team provide 24-hour emergency response services to survivors and their significant others, and believes that prevention and intervention are essential to a healthy community. Whereas no one person, organization, agency, or community can eliminate sexual assault on their own, but can, through collaboration and partnership, work together to support those impacted, improve responses, and ensure that survivors are not re-victimized. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed by the Trinidad City Council, reaffirming its commitment to the North Coast Rape Crisis Team and its values, the word HEAL, HEAL. So the H stands for help survivors by meeting them where they're at. E, empower them throughout their healing journeys. A, affirm their choices. L, listen to and believe their truths. And the city of Trinidad thereby acknowledges April 2026 as Sexual Assault Awareness Month.
Did you say there was an event on May 2nd, a fundraiser
Yes.
at Arcata Community Center? So I just want to underscore that because it sounds like that would be a great place to go to support the organization. And it sounds like people lost a fair amount of funding. So if folks are available, that would be a great thing, a great way to support this. And does the council have any questions or comments on the proclamation?
Well, I would like to thank the speaker for coming. I know the organization has been around for a very long time, doing lots of wonderful work for people here in Humboldt County. Sad to hear that the funding has been cut so drastically, and I hope we can find a way to keep it going well into the future.
And then, sorry, is it okay if I still read it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to the Trinidad City Council for the ongoing support of Sexual Assault Awareness Month and the work of the North Coast Rape Crisis Team. For over 50 years, NCRCT has been providing essential free services to survivors of sexual assault in our community. These include a 24-hour bilingual crisis line, accompaniments to evidence collection exams, support through law enforcement and criminal court processes, crisis counseling, and financial assistance for survivors and their families. Last year alone, we assisted 554 survivors, and our services are available regardless of whether survivors are involved in the criminal justice process or when the harm has occurred. And we will continue to support them for as long as needed. This work is not possible without our community partners, including law enforcement, the district attorney's office, Top Poly Humboldt College of the Redwoods, the sexual assault nurse examiners, and tribal organizations. This work is not possible without our community partners, including we need your help to ensure that survivors continue to receive the care they deserve. NCRCT is looking at 50% funding cut to the state of California, and there is no money in the budget for victims of crime. It's imperative that our community be heard and communicate with our state representatives that this is unacceptable. We encourage our partners and encourage our community to. Sorry, there we go.
Hey, you're doing great. Thank you.
Okay. We encourage you to visit our website ncrct.org, where there is a script available to make your voice heard. We also invite our community to attend the Dancing in the Rain Gala, which is on May 2nd at the Community Arcata Center. And thank you again for supporting our work and the survivors that we serve. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I really appreciate you being here, and it's, a great organization. Thank you very much. I will offer if any of the members of the community would like to comment about the proclamation or any comments or questions. Okay, seeing none, thanks again, and I'll bring it back to the council then for our next discussion decision, which is to award the construction contract for Main Street, Paffords Point Drive, and West Haven Drive. This is for rehabilitation this is the STIP project, State Transportation Improvement Program. And we are looking to award this to GR Sunberg. So I'll ask staff to give us an update on that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this project, heard about it. I brought it to your attention. I believe it was back in late this year, late 2025, maybe December. But it's a project that essentially is to improve the pavement of Main Street and the pedestrian accessibility of the sidewalk on the south side of Main Street. So that sidewalk is substandard in size. If anyone's walked on it, they probably ran into bushes that are hanging off the shoulder, but it's also because just of the narrowness of that. particular sidewalk. And the north side of Main Street has a accessible sidewalk. And this project, by improving the surface condition on Main Street, Patrick's Point Drive, and even our segment of West Haven Drive going up the hill under the freeway, is going to a conclusion entirely. There's small segments that are inaccessible, but the Main Street segment will conclude a decades of developing an accessible pathway on both sides of our streets, Trinity and Main, to Edwards and then down the harbor. So what we're talking about tonight is awarding the bid to GR Sunberg Inc. They came in as the lowest responsive and responsible bidder based on the lowest bid amounts. They submitted, there were 6 contractors that all submitted. The bid period closed on March 16th. And of the 6 responsive bids, again, was GR Sunberg coming in, I believe it was the base bid just under $484,000 or just over $484,000. Now, again, the project itself is pretty exciting from our perspective. The STIP, State Transportation Improvement Fund, is our program is a pretty large funding source of the city's road. Those are the biggest chunks of money that we receive. And we've received several, we've been very competitive with how the city receives its street funding. I think it's partly because we've got an engineer looking after us on the technical advisory committee with HCOG, Josh Wolf. He's always got his hand out on behalf of Trinidad when it comes time to applying for these funds. But as I understand it, this is going to be the last substantial chunk of money we're going to see for our roads for the foreseeable future, at least 5 years, maybe more. And again, we've been pretty good 1 year after the next, getting this money to improve our streets and roads. So we're going to have to be creative once this project's over with and how we maintain our roads with our limited road funding. But this project right here is pretty exciting. And I don't know if I have the construction schedule here to do, but we're looking to, after this bid is awarded tonight, we will be proceeding with some of the detail behind the scenes construction work, utility markings, and so on and so forth, probably to start the project late May, early June. I'd have to check with Josh to see if we're still on schedule for that, but that is what is before you tonight. There are a couple other added bid items. One is to patch pave the bottom of Berry Road. And again, these additive bid items, there's no promise that they will be funded. It kind of depends on how the main base bid item goes in terms of cost. But there have been some residents that have discussed the bottom of Berry Road, specifically the folks who live up there as they come and go off frontage, that section is starting to alligator pretty bad, pothole. So we want to give some attention to that segment. It might have to be scaled back a little bit, but for the most part, we're hoping to get a lot of road surface out of this project, and we're looking for your thoughts as far as what do you think tonight?
All right, questions, comments from the council for
Question. I noticed that there was a tentative bid number 2 for Berry Road. It said that it was not eligible for funding. Can you explain a little more about that process?
Yeah, I think it wasn't in the. I think there's a connection to this project with prior priority lists, right? So Berry was a bonus.
Right.
So I think the way Josh explained it to me was that you could try to throw it in, but there's no guarantees that the state is going to offer us funding. Now, if the project, for some amazing, miraculous reason, comes in slightly under cost, that might be something Caltrans would consider. But because it was a preordained project for surface improvements specifically for this program, there was no guarantees. It's I think you call it a collector street. It's not a primary artery street.
Okay.
And I think so the CIP program is focused on your main primary street.
And I also noticed that, some mention of using thermoplastic for the striping line of this. I'm wondering, I guess I'm wondering because I've heard and I've observed, we've been having some problems with thermoplastic that's used here in Trinidad. Seems to be breaking down fairly quickly. Because we hear more, seems like all the time about microplastics, plastics in the environment. Whether that's really the best product. That's right. Anything about it, but it just seems like there might be something else that's more durable or less helpful to the, you know, we've got our Trinidad Bay, SVS, right, where all the water drains down to. Curious about that.
That is an excellent comment. Josh was unable to make it tonight, he's on vacation. I'm sure he's gonna have some thoughts about that in terms of, you know, the latest technology, the duration of the time in which these things break down. I know that Mr. The resident out here in the audience has been alerting us of the Ocean Avenue thermoplastic that broke down by the speed humps. The same happened down there on the crosswalks
Yeah,
on Everett Street. Those failed, and whether it was a bad batch of plastic or some batch was, you know, better than others, I think is one good, you know, we can talk about and discuss. But the other thing is just just plastics in general, you know, not having that deteriorate, break down, and then so I know when we've discussed with our street engineers, paint, which we put on scenic drive, oftentimes it takes barely a good winter to disappear. As far as the cost effectiveness this goes, I think that would be a really good question. I can bring that up with our engineers and maybe come.
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Other comments?
Along the same lines, Gabe, are they responsible then for the breakdown, you know, financially, or like to make good where the striping is falling apart?
Yes, there's a certain warranty period that comes after the product is laid down, and as part of these contracts. As far as how long beyond that contractual obligation for warranty repairs, those are listed in the contracts themselves. Typically, I believe they're 6 months to a year, for some components of the project, especially tape. But when it comes to the markings, plastics, that's something that we'll have to dig into the contract a little bit, but there are warranty periods, yes, for the breakdown. And we exercised our ability to direct, you know, and cash in on that warranty period on the Edward Street market. Remember that? Thermoplastic was breaking down after a most recent.
Right, anything else? Any other questions? Right, let me go to members of the public, the community. Any questions about this project?
Thank you, everybody. Aaron Hagan, and three of you. My standard question when it comes to projects within the city of Trinidad, brought this up over a number of years, a number of projects now, all for the improvements we're getting in town. I want to remind you of the ask that I've made to this council that it be included in bid documents as part of the RFP. I'm not sure if it was with this project, but specifically I'm talking about screening around the construction staging area, which is routine parking lot behind Murphy. Visual distraction, it looks awful, it's hideous. It does not represent our town well. And it's a very simple thing. The last project was great. We got some screenings put up there, but unfortunately now the contractor basically didn't care. That put a lot of effort into trying to get them to fix it, but they didn't. So I encourage you again, remember, these projects are amazing. They're a short duration of inconvenience, but it's important to try and do everything that you can might impact constituents in the next. I hope the same will happen with this one.
Thank you. Other comments regarding the project? Okay, then in that case, seeing none, I will bring it back to the council. I believe we need a motion to approve this bid. Is that correct?
Move to award the construction contract for Main Street to GR Sunbird.
Is there a second?
I'll second it with the comment that perhaps it can emphasize what Aaron just talked about, the importance to get more follow through on that this time. Well, here and the contractor would be better standing with us.
Okay, and so do we have a second with the caveat that there is support for, good construction hygiene around how things are presented to the public. All those in favor? Aye. All right, and I think one thing that comes up also, I didn't hear Aaron mention it, but was just adequate public awareness around a bill or a project as well. So signage and all that kind of stuff. It's all usually part and parcel of what staff does, but I'll just remind everyone of that as well. Okay, the next item then is the update discussion regarding 2026 Planning Commission projects and priorities. I actually asked for this to be on the agenda as a former member of the Planning Commission. I was very curious about what's going on, what exciting things around the general plan and other activities. And I appreciate our city planner being here fresh off of vacation to give us an update.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is something, especially when we're very, very busy, I like to provide sort of a list of projects to the Planning Commission. It's kind of a gut check of what we've been doing. It kind of helps think about priorities. It seems like there's never enough staff time and budget to complete everything. So looking at priorities in that context is always important. We have a lot of big ongoing projects like the general plan update that people are always interested in. So it's good to kind of get a status report on those kind of things. And then, I'm thinking about your upcoming budget discussions, where we're at on some of these projects and what might fiscal year. So I don't know how much detail you want me to go into these. I will, I'm gonna highlight the general plan update. Obviously, that's a key project for a lot of people. One of the issues we've had is it's a lot of work to get that general plan updated. And the Coastal Commission has taken the position that they want the entire general plan and the entire ordinance, all the regulations to implement that ordinance all at one time. And that's really difficult to get that together. And so, we've been stuck with this local coastal program that was the first in the state to be certified, is now 45 years old. So, but now I have been discussing alternative approaches with them, and they seem amenable to go more element by element, especially where that makes sense. So I think that we'll probably start with the safety element because it's a grant funded at this point. We're nearing completion with that. I've been working on regulations to implement that. So that addresses seismic safety, landslides, sea level rise, issues. There is one component of the safety element that's a little bit further behind, and that's the emergency response section. That's here with the city's infrastructure and programs having to do with that, but it's also not a Coastal Act issue, so that section doesn't have to go to the Coastal Commission. I did provide sort of a matrix here of each of the elements that we have reviewed. You can see that we've pretty much got them all fairly well updated. We're going to have to go back to some of these ones that are from more like 2019, 20, sure that they're still current. There's things like the cultural element that's been progress has been kind of complicated and hampered by the ongoing litigation. And then, another one that I'll highlight is housing. So there's been a lot of housing issues that have come up in the last year or two. State law, there's been more and more state laws passing that limit jurisdictions' ability to limit housing and then also require certain types of housing. The city has been somewhat insulated by that in the past, but by being in the coastal zone, but now more and more of those laws are being applied in the coastal zones. So I've been spending quite a bit of time working on implementing housing element policies, the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, and some other ordinance amendments to implement state housing laws. Those all have to go through the Coastal Commission, so that will be an ongoing project. But the housing element will need to be updated, and that's going to be a big project. Everybody in the county has to do it. We're hoping that we can pool some resources regionally for some of the data in particular that goes into the housing elements. But that's something I want to highlight. Let's see what else. In terms of new upcoming projects, annexation, so the water connections have brought up the topic of annexation, and so the city will be talking about that. Feasibility of it, looking at the community's feelings about annexation and what might make sense for the city. I have, as I mentioned in the past, I think annexation is going to be important for the city in the future because all these new laws, state requirements, it's getting more and more difficult for such a small city and small staff to keep up with all of these. Let's see, water obviously is going to be another upcoming issue. There's a couple of things. The planning commission does want to make sure that we don't put a bunch of effort into projects and then they sort of don't cross the finish line and then fall off the radar. So there's a couple of things. There's all the new planning applications and forms and guidelines that were prepared a couple of years ago and the grants. Those are pretty much ready to go. We just want to bring them to you, kind of introduce them to the public and then start implementing them. Another one for me that's not really a planning project is the recodification of the ordinances online and getting those updated. Those are pretty outdated. And several planning commissioners commented about the city's website. There are new accessibility requirements that are going to go into effect next year that will affect pretty much everything on their website. And that's kind of a big deal, something to think of. Ongoing things, the OWTS program, I've been working with Anton and keeping that implemented, but enforcement is an issue. It's not necessarily a planning task, but there's a few outstanding properties that aren't in compliance. So thinking about what kind of effort to put into that to get more compliance. The regional climate action plan will be something that's coming up this year. So the county developed that with all the other jurisdictions. Jurisdictions are starting to adopt that and also looking at developing an MOU for implementing the climate action plan. Is reducing greenhouse gases primarily to reduce climate change impacts. Let's see what else. Trail issues often come up. So again, there's limited staff time and budget. We do seem to have a pretty, we had some turnover with planning staff at SHN. We do seem to have that stable. So I do have some help at SHN. There's also tasks for city staff as well. And everybody's kind of got their hands full. So that's something to think about prioritizing. Budgets. Oh, so it looks like there's a couple of commissioners here. I want to provide some input, and then I'm happy to answer questions about these.
If you don't mind, I'll start. I'm excited to weigh in here. So I just wanted to let for those that don't know, city is required by law to do a general plan, and there are 8 elements that are required by law, at least for a city our size. I think there's another one, environmental justice, that we're not required to do. And so I just want to really compliment the Planning Commission for making as much progress, as it has against, getting all this done, because it's a big job for such a small town with limited resources. So I think it's, fabulous progress in the last several years. I wanted to maybe make a suggestion that, since we do want to try to streamline that, just food for thought for the Planning Commission is to look at the design element as potentially being collapsed in with the land use element. That maybe that's an option, so that we don't have to have it as a standalone element. And I think you commented here that the conservation, open space, recreation element can be separated into multiple elements. I think that probably makes sense. It seems like a lot of cities are doing that. The other thing I wanted folks to understand is, because we're a local coastal, small coastal town, the local coastal program, or LCP, pretty much, doesn't it overlap almost 100% with the general plan?
Yeah, so, it can get complicated, but because Trinidad is essentially entirely in the coastal zone, right now, our general plan is our coastal land use plan. There are a few pieces of what's required by the state that are not Coastal Act issues, like noise, housing, and emergency response, that I mentioned. So those are 3 kind of big sections. We also, within our general plan, we mark certain policies that are not Coastal Act implementation policies, that are not going to be part of the LCP, the local coastal program. But then there are also Coastal Act requirements that are included in the state general plan requirements. Water quality is one. So anyway, so essentially they will be one and the same, but there will be pieces of our general plan that are not going to be certified by the.
That's all I have on the general plan. I have some comments on some other things, but I want to see if other councilors have any comments or questions for you.
Well, I do. I really appreciate the report. It's very informative. Great to see what other major governmental commission here in Trinidad is always working on things. I'm a little curious, can you tell us anything more? I noticed that there's something planned. I don't know if an application has been filed behind Workers Market yet.
I forgot to mention that. So of course, these are projects that we're planning on working on, but then there's always things that come up. Sometimes they're city projects, but also applications. So as applications come in, we're obligated to work on processing those. I know of 2 fairly prominent ones, and that would include the development behind Murphy's Market. So that vacant lot won't be a staging area for too much longer for construction. The owner is looking at building a housing project, so it's probably geared towards senior housing, preferably. So they're early in the design phase. They've done some of their soil testing this winter. I just met with them, and I've had some previous correspondence about regulations and requirements. And then I just reached out to staff to, probably want to get Public Works and the city engineer and other staff together and kind of talk about, it might be a subdivision, it might be a planned development with more clustered type project. And so, streets, improvements, utilities, all those kind of things. So yes, I expect that application to come in later this year. The other kind of prominent one is gonna be that last lot, Pacific Avenue. So the parking lot at the end of Edwards Pacific Avenue, big lot there. They are working.
Good to know. I see you also mentioned that we might need to get some help with our housing development. You're talking about like an outside consultant that you just farm it out to.
That is one suggestion. I think it's gonna take a lot of staff time. Several jurisdictions are already putting out RFPs for the work. Like I said, I'm hoping that we can combine resources for some of the data and regional information. But it's just gonna be something that's a real time sink for staff, and so it might be worthwhile.
Partner up with.
Yeah. Yeah.
The mentioned the ADA and our city website issues. Would this be modifying things so that, for example, a person could hear the contents of the website if they couldn't see it or something?
Yeah, and I was kind of looking, I don't know if you're familiar with it, Gabe, but yeah, it looks like it's gonna apply to most documents, unless they're specifically archived and older documents, it's gonna apply to almost everything. And so everything is gonna have to be, OCR recognized text, with be able to read, and all that kind of thing. So I think that's gonna be a big project.
So the platform itself, Civic Plus, is ADA compliant. But if documents, the readability of documents, so when documents are scanned in, as you know, then they may not be readable. And so that's what we're gonna have to look at. So it's a content issue. And to your point, that's gonna require some fairly heavy lifting. It's a content issue. There's a lot of documents.
Remove or archive the content.
Yeah.
So something to think about.
Yeah. And then the focus on annexation, I couldn't tell from the report whether that was specifically to the Mill Creek area, or is that more like a generalized statement?
So yes, it would be specific to Mill Creek. I do think that the Langford Road area would be another area too that might make sense. I did just get an inquiry about a water connection from some. And I know, LAFCO would like to see that area annexed because it's essentially an island.
It's like a dead end.
Yeah. So, and the dead end is in city limits. It's a weird.
It is or is not?
Yeah, the very last property on Langford is in
Oh,
city limits.
There's some in between that are not.
Yeah. And so, I think the next step for that is probably public outreach. I think a lot of people will, at least initially, resist annexation, but I think we all need to understand what it means, the advantages and disadvantages. And then the city is also looking at potentially annexing some property north of the cemetery, add on to the area of the cemetery. And then I think the lot north of the Saunders residents, they're interested in it. So that's kind of it.
And you noted that the RV parks are hard to define for land purposes.
Yeah, so the RV parks have been kind of an ongoing question. So currently those are the two properties in the city that are zoned visitor services.
Right, the only two.
The only two properties, although the Trinidad Bay Trailer Courts is made up of several properties, but managed as one. And visitor services are a priority use under the Coastal Act. So to change that zoning, we did do a visitor services study, to look at visitor services in the greater Trinidad area. But the uses of both of those RV parks have converted to long-term tenancy. So they don't rent to overnight short-term spaces. So really the existing use is not consistent with the zoning. But they do also provide us a form of portable housing in the city of Trinidad. But we got a formal determination do you think from HCD that RVs, they don't count RVs
At all.
at all? They don't count as what?
Housing.
So, you know, we have to, you know, I've been trying to, there's been points in time where I've been trying to get a hold of the owners to talk about what they envision for the future. And Trinidad Bay Trailer Courts is for sale. And I've talked to a couple of people that were interested. You know, and they do seem to favor maybe a mix of uses. So and I think that would be beneficial, but
Could we zone them urban residential?
you could, but then the coastal commission is gonna say that where are your visitor services? And that's why we did the visitor services study, and so we'll have to see if they think that's adequate.
Yeah, we've got our vacation rentals.
We do, and there's, you know, RV parks and breakfast and hotels and vacation rentals. So, you know, we were kind of looking from Patrick's Point to Little River area.
Now, for our low income housing situation, does that work that we just have to zone certain area for housing in general, or does it have to be zoned for low income housing in particular?
That's a good question, and I am not that familiar with all the housing laws and the new changes and the nuances, which is another reason I'm recommending, you know, someone who specializes in that do the housing.
Go through.
But yeah, I think that's the main idea, is that you show that you have land that's zoned and at those densities. The problem is we're never gonna get those densities.
I understand.
So I don't know, I don't really know how that's gonna.
Lots of jurisdictions are in the same boat.
Well, lots of yes, I think the numbers are beyond what any jurisdiction in this county can be.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
From what I can see. But anyway, okay, well, that's helpful. That's all I had. Thank you for that.
Just to piggyback on annexation, I like the idea of setting up a committee, but I would really suggest that we set up more of an ad hoc committee made up of the city manager, the city planner, and probably 2 members of the city council, just to do the strategic planning part of this, and then bring it back to the planning commission potentially just for consistency with the general plan. And just for a quick review, and then the council would vote, and then it would go to LAFCO. So that would be the process. But throughout that process, then we have the public hearing. So, for example, when we're having discussions at the planning commission, that's public hearing. When we have discussions here, that's public hearing. And the ad hoc committee could work a little bit on kind of the communication that Trevor was referring to. So, going out to once there's a decision on the prioritization of annexation, then going out to that community and finding out if they want to be annexed and getting their feedback. So just as a process, I think, that seems like it might be logical. So I don't know then if we would need to agendize putting together, I think we would, to put together the ad hoc committee. So what do you guys think about that? Does that sound like a potential process?
Yeah, if we're gonna do that, I think we also should include a couple of members of the public who may be interested in participating, rather than just elected officials.
That's a good idea. Yeah, I would have, in fact, included somebody from the planning commission, but for Brown Act reasons, that would be, I prefer to keep it an ad hoc committee because we want it to be just a couple of meetings of just strategic and not a standing committee that goes on for a long period of time.
Yeah, well, we can talk about it more in depth when it actually comes up on the agenda, but also at the risk of.
It's a good idea.
I know a number of our staff members are really juggling a lot of things right now.
Yeah.
And I'm a little hesitant to give them one more thing to juggle.
Yeah, I don't know about the timing for this. Maybe we're talking 3 to 6 months from now, but we do have a requirement, I believe, from LAFCO to address the annexation within a year, within 12 months is why I was thinking we should do something in the kind of near term on that one. But maybe we can I appreciate where you're coming from. We could keep it light, try to keep the work as light as possible. Right.
So we don't need any action taken on the report.
I don't think so. This is informational. I
Yeah.
think, to the extent that you guys want to give feedback to the planning commission, recommendations and, some of the things we just talked about. We are going to have to address the website, but we had a little task force last time, so we can try to get that going again with maybe some outside help. OWTS, I did want to mention one thing about that is we do have an open position, right, for a program manager. Would that person take over most of the OWTS, or is that still, does Trevor or the city planner still have to do that? Because I was hoping to offload some of her work there, but
Yeah, I think there's definitely a conversation to be had internally. I think Trevor's expertise is always going to be required. First is the consultation process in case, there's some complicated systems. But yeah, I mean, I think ideally the position that would accept that responsibility would have the knowledge and the ability and the skills to be able to execute that program.
all right. Sorry, I didn't mean to get into like a staffing.
Oh, yeah. No. That's a really good question.
Help offload some more.
I had to be careful and then look at Trevor.
Yeah. All right, other comments or questions on this? Otherwise, I'll go to public. All right, any public comments or questions about the planning commission report or from the chair?
I'll speak as the chair of the planning commission, kind of look on behalf of the other planning commissioners. I see Richard's with us as well, virtually, so hopefully he can fill in the holes. So thank you, Trevor, for putting this together. And I want to begin by saying the planning commission is very, very, very content and happy with the work that Trevor has done for the city and continues to do for the city. Our comments that I'm going to share with you now are in no way a reflection on Trevor, her dedication, her commitment to the city. Okay. But just kind of, I highlighted a few key phrases from Trevor's staff report here, right? I'm just going to read a few words and I think the point will make itself. Limited budget and staff time, backlog of important projects, staff capacity has been a significant component. Coming kind of with that, the costs or the repercussions that are borne by applicants, right? Because they don't have the time to do things. Suggest seeking outside help. The thing here being that there's not enough time, not enough Trevor to go around. And this is, I think, my fourth or fifth time around the sun with this very topic as a planning commissioner, both as a commissioner and as the chair. And I know last year we came and asked at the joint meeting, which we declined to have this year because quite honestly, we didn't feel that it was enough bang for the buck. It was a meeting where we simply got together, had a conversation, and then several of us on the planning commission feel like nothing ever happens meaningful as a result of these conversations. So we felt it was better just to have Trevor give her report and me to kind of backstop that, and perhaps Richard as well. The desire to offload workload from Trevor to city staff is admirable. I think I've heard my entire time in the city of Trinidad before I became involved as city staff, we can do this, but it's at the expense of that, right? That's been kind of a bedrock principle I've heard expressed by Dave going forward. So the idea to take workload from Trevor and transfer to the city staff seems like a wonderful solution. But I'm going to tell you as the planning commissioner, we're not making progress, and we're not making progress, not because of lack of desire on Trevor's part, but because the capacity, the surge capacity to get us through some of these humps and hills just is not there. So, for example, the housing, like seeking outside consulting work for that. I know we're consulting, and that might seem a little bit weird and bizarre to people, but we need this surge capacity to move some of these projects along. There's just things that require technical expertise that a planner has, that to get somebody from city staff up to speed might not be the right fix. We could just simply go outside and find somebody who has the technical expertise, give them their marching orders, have them finish that task, and then that is now behind us, freeing up staff capacity to do other things. The planning commission does not have the authority to implement that. We do not set the budget. We do not set the priorities. We can't make sure that these things happen. What we can do is come again and ask you guys, please, implore on you. This is important. We're back again asking to offer this support. And SHN may have some internal capacity, but as we've heard, that wanes. So there's an RFP coming up for the main planning staff. Might be an appropriate time to look for some kind of a little, placeholder for some additional capacity there. And I don't want this to necessarily become an ongoing thing, an additional budget thing, but perhaps a 1 or 2 year budget cycle thing to really kind of create this backlog and get us through. Because as these projects are taking time, the work that we have done as your planning commission, we're going to have to see it again. And that's incredibly frustrating and demoralizing and demotivating for us when something is coming back to us simply because it wasn't processed in enough time because of a lack of staff capacity. This is a cycle, a merry-go-round. We're not, I'm trying to come back to the same place, but it needs to be a corkscrew. We need to be going up or down, not coming back to the exact same place. A comment just generally about annexation. I'm not going to get into pro or anti because I understand that's going to be a lot of discussion, but our ask for the planning commission on that is that these thoughts need to happen at the city council level. And thank you, Cheryl, for thinking about that right now. This is your wheelhouse, not ours, right? We get to deal with the results of that as far as land use planning, zoning, those types of things. But the decision to annex and to move forward, those types of things, that's your role, not ours. So we want to make sure that that's something that's going on and being discussed now, because that issue will be before us as a city, one way or the other, through water access things or greater issues that might concern the survivability of the city, right? Of our city government, our economics of our city. The job, the planning commission, we understand our job. It's to look long range. We talk about as we make planning decisions that when we have an item in front of us, this might be today's solution, but we also build things in for the future, right? Because these documents live on, decisions live on. So I need you guys to really hear and please do that. So that's kind of all I have from the planning commission side. I don't know if Richard has anything else to add. Thanks.
Thank you. Richard, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, I'll just say that I think Aaron has articulated much of our concerns very well. So thanks very much for that. I'll just make one additional comment, and that is, as you can see from the matrix that Trevor has provided to you, there's a lot of the general plan elements that are in fairly decent form right now. And what I mean by that is they are at a point where it would be very useful if the city council began a process of reviewing them, or at least taking some time occasionally to allow us to discuss those as part of your agenda. The reason I say this is that there's going to be this giant wall of water that's going to be coming at you of all of these elements, and it's going to be very challenging to go through all of them all at once. So I would like to try to slow the water down a little bit and give you an opportunity, or hope you would take the opportunity to begin looking at these elements so that you can provide the input back to us, and we can do the review process and approval process as efficiently as possible. Again, thanks, Aaron, for doing a great job of articulating our thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any, I want to respond a little bit to the planning commission concerns, but any other public comments about the general planning process or the planning commission? Want to take up too much time without allowing for community input? All right, then I'm going to bring this back. So I am a little disappointed to hear that there are things that the council should be doing to support the planning commission that we're not doing, and that we are not having joint meetings because there's a concern that the council isn't coming through. So what I'd like to suggest is that we get a kind of a concrete set of recommendations from the planning commission for the city council to review, a short list of exactly what you're looking for, because there's two ways, two approaches to this. And the last time we met, we discussed prioritization of projects, so taking things off the plate so that Trevor would have time to focus on the planning commission needs. So you either remove the work, right, or you get more resources. So if we needed more resources and we didn't get more resources, we either don't have the funding to do it, or we're not being properly kind of prodded to get that done. So, you know, we got to do one or the other. And we don't need to wait for meetings like this. You guys can just shoot me an email or, you know, to Gabe an email, copy me, and we need to, you know, really make decisions. So, you know, there may be times where the council, we don't have a budget for something. So then, as you know, I would just say at that point, it's maybe we don't do it. So we've got to be really clear about that. And I think the challenge for the planning commission is always, well, it's easy to say don't do it, but if we're required by law to do it, for example, then we've just got to do it. So anyway, I would love to get really crystal clear on some of these things. And so, for example, WTS used to be managed, a big portion of it was handled, the day-to-day kind of heavy lifting was the program manager. That was my understanding anyway. And she's no longer with us. And so, you know, that's why I say we've got to fill some of these positions and offload some of the, I guess, the more administrative work from Trevor. Because, you know, frankly, I think she is her role is a little more senior than that. So we want to take advantage of that. So anyway, long story short, you know, I want to make sure that you guys are getting supported the way you need to be. And I don't think the council was aware that there's like something we were supposed to be doing, unless I'm mistaken. Anybody on the council feel differently?
My thinking was along similar lines, but you said it so well.
Okay, so we would like the help. You just need to be really clear with us on what you need, and then we can at least say yes or no. Okay, great. Thank you. I'm glad we had this discussion. All right, with that, I guess we're gonna move on. Thank you again, you guys. Thanks, Trevor. What is our next item here, guys? We are on the number 4, excuse me. The updated discussion regarding the April 4th West Haven Drive water main leak and the extended service outage that resulted. And I'm going to turn this over to Gabe to kind of let us know what the scope of this discussion is.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor. So the purpose, I'll just be very clear with this, my intro here, that the purpose of this discussion is to focus on the water leak and the incident there. So there's no action requested. It's a presentation item only, providing a post-incident summary in the same manner that we did with the January 3rd leak. Give you a current status update, help answer questions, and receive feedback that will help us guide future decisions regarding this water system. It's pretty much the unprecedented nature of this leak. You know, a 36-hour road closure before, you know, the city ever had a chance to fully examine the leak site itself, followed by 76-hour outage for about 30 customers. That is not our usual routine by any means. So far this year, we've had 2 incidents that have broken new records for us in our water. So that's why it's before you today. If it was a routine leak, this would not be necessary. It's part of the, you know, in the job of a water operator. But in this particular case, and you heard during items from the board, there were some other impacts to the residents that live adjacent to this particular site. But I want to focus again on the leak itself, just for the record. So the leak occurred due to a service line break on Friday, April 3rd, at approximately 6:00 p.m. on a 4-inch section of pipe located in the southbound shoulder at 254 Northwest Haven Drive. The break was caused by the impact of a large redwood tree that fell across the road. The tree took out overhead power lines, communication lines, and blocked the road for nearly 6 hours. It occurred on an older segment of main line that provides a circulation loop in the distribution system. Travels on West Haven Drive under the freeway to serve customers on Langford Road. There's 2 under the freeway points, one at Baker Ranch, and that goes from essentially basically near the water tanks, and another one to serve Langford Road. And those distribution connections serve to circulate water through the system. Dead end branches are not typically what you want to see in a water system. You want to see water. The valving for this segment of road is very complex. The form of this asbestos concrete called AC line splits off and runs parallel to the 10-inch line on West Haven Drive, and then it reconnects in town at Main and View Street at the intersection. At least one of the control valves are currently inoperable, another is questionable, and others are not intuitively located. The scope of the break, in conjunction with the complex isolation process, severely impaired the city water system's ability to minimize the number of customers impacted. Again, it was around 30, and also the duration of this outage. A precautionary boil water notice was issued on Saturday when the line was isolated and depressurized. So utility crews on site could remove the tree, perform overhead and underground utility repairs. The city was last on the pecking order to do its work because our work is underground and everything else had basically been covering our ability to investigate the leak. And until the tree was removed and until the overhead lines were back up, we couldn't do anything. The break, again, interrupted 30 customers connected to West Haven Drive and Langford Road, because that's where that pipe dug down into the ground under the freeway over to serve. So I think we had a lot of, we had some chatter from Langford Road saying, well, what do we have to do with this? But that was the reason why, because it's part of a circulation. It lasted 76 hours from 10 a.m. Saturday morning, April 4th through 2 p.m. April 7th. And this incident again further emphasizes ongoing concerns about our vulnerability of our small water system, challenged by increasing costs and regulatory and environmental pressures. Let's see. So I want to maybe just talk for a second about the procedure, because in contrast with the scenic drive leak, which took about 5 hours from the time we were notified to isolate, and then another 3 hours to repair, all total about 8 hours. In this case, we received notification by the owner of 254 Northwest Haven Drive who witnessed a tree fall. And that was about 6 p.m. Friday, April 3rd. The operator called and routed the water operator routed calls to all public works and city management staff about 7:15. I arrived on the scene, assessed the situation, identified the link point, and then we relayed the information to our operators who were en route. We worked until there was 4 of us working for the first couple of hours, 3 of us until 1 a.m. So just trying to figure out how to isolate this valve while all the other PG&E initiated crews were mobilized. So right tree service, everybody was basically on the scene waiting for their orders to make sure the power lines were de-energized before they started cutting chainsaws on the trees. So we concluded our efforts at about 1 a.m. And if you add up those staff hours, it's quite a bit. It's almost 19 hours by the time you calculate the next morning when we figure out what the Langford Road valve turned the water off at the tree site on West Haven Drive. So I thought that was really interesting to note because, troubleshooting is never straightforward. The first crew on the scene has to wrap their head around what's going on. Then you got to assess the whole situation, and it could be 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. As by contrast, the January 3rd leak, we were notified at 3 in the morning. And by the time we got on scene at 6 a.m., we had to wrap our head around things. I think that was pretty extraordinary relative to what occurred here. But the situation in this particular case is relatively complex, as I've mentioned. The challenges to our timeline that complicated our water restoration effort were at least 4 main points I listed in the staff report. The break occurred suddenly after 5 p.m. on a Friday night. City was unable to access the site for excavation until 8 p.m. Saturday, the night after, 4 hours later. And despite every effort we made to reach state drinking water regulators and county public health officials on Sunday, it was Easter and no one responded. we just could not get any support from the public health labs and anyone else to. Once you issue the boil water notice, which we have to do because when a line breaks, especially a concrete asbestos line, you gotta be very careful of what's happening to that water. It could have been crushed. I mean, we saw a tree fall, it could have been collapsed, the water could have been running, feeding the town, brown, dirty water, contaminated water with organics, who knows what. So the requirement is to issue the boil water notice. In order to lift the boil water notice, as we learned on January 3rd, is you need to take the sample to the lab and you need to wait 24 hours for that sample to incubate, and then you get clearance from the lab, and then you get clearance from your state regulator. So it was unfortunate, the series of events and leaks up. Happened at Friday night at 5 o'clock. That's what happens. On January 3rd, we had exactly the opposite scenario. We had public health officials, because they were already in emergency mode because of the weather and everything else that was going on. They were standing ready beside us, ready to help us with our samples on Sunday. In this case, that didn't happen. The weather was perfect, and it was a holiday weekend. So it was an all hands staff response. We arrived on the scene within an hour. The residents that didn't have power, they had no internet. So their communications were slightly hampered as well. So we used the city's emergency notification system to send out a text message alert to all the subscribers of our water system, our water emergency notification system. Now that would have gone to all water customers, no matter where you were at, but at least we were able to reach people by cell if there was a small amount of cell service. We published updates to the website, 4 p.m. Saturday, 9 and 5 p.m. Sunday, 9 and 5 p.m. Monday, and then 2 p.m. Tuesday when the boil water notice was lifted. And that archive is on our city website. Our tank capacity was stabilized that night. We were running about 72% tank levels, and we never got down past about 8% because of the quick response, and because it was, as a photograph I added in the staff report of the leak, it was just like a fracture. It wasn't as bad as we had to estimate based on the look of the scene at the time. So we lost overall I'm estimating about 40 to 50,000 gallons of water, as opposed to 400,000 gallons of water. Took about 19 staff hours total when you combine all of the heads that needed to be put together, especially because we had a tree blocking the road. So some of us had to go to Langford, some of us had to go on the other side of the road turning valves, and others had to be on the opposite side of the road turning valves. It was a really good lesson in making sure your two-way radios are working. And cell phone batteries, they died, so we had to switch to two-way. And also illumination. Wright Tree Service showed up with a giant, lighting devices and generators, but our crew has headlamps and things like that tend to burn out after 5 to 7 hours. So we learned some good lessons in some of the equipment that we need to upgrade for late night reconnaissance work. Let's see. So overall, it was the staff time. We have not yet received invoice for GRS. We were able to contact GRS that night, and they mobilized first thing in the morning on the next day for us. In fact, they helped some of the tree removal, even though we weren't ready to do our job yet. It's the invoice for that day is estimated $10,000 to $15,000. We're not 100% sure yet, but they mobilized at 10 a.m. ready for us. We didn't actually finish the job and even get to crack into the ground until about 6 p.m. So, that is a cost that we have not yet figured out what it's going to be as compared to the $6,000 invoice that we received on January 3rd. So the incident's unique. The extended outage duration time, 76 hours, is definitely unprecedented. Repressurizing the water line, serving the affected customers without receiving clean tests from the lab and concluding the boil with water notice first would have had severe consequences to downstream users. That is the town. So had we not kept that water line off for those 2 additional days, then, and we turned it on once we knew we had to repair. That water would have been sent down direct hit into town, and we would have had to notify all residents of town of a boil water notice first thing Sunday morning. And if we did that, then the Department of Environmental Health and Public Health probably would have woken up. And they would have been here, most likely closing restaurants and businesses. So that was a small success, but we had no choice because of the way our valving and our hydrants are set up on that particular stretch of West Haven Drive. Had we had a hydrant a little further and another couple of valves that we knew how they worked, we could have flushed that line first and then isolated it in a segment, like a zone, repressurized it, and then the folks that were there could have at least been able to boil water. But in consequences, without having those valves and those hydrants and within reasonable proximity of one another, typically hydrants are spec'd out by the AWWA and fire agencies to be within a specific amount of feet of one another. In this particular case, we don't have that. So yeah, so that is one of the reasons why the duration was also extended. Also affecting the school Monday morning. So that is the summary of the report. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to hear it. I'm happy to try to answer. But again, just wanted you to be updated because it was an unprecedented situation.
It's good. First, I think the council would like to pass our thanks and appreciation to the Public Works team and to you for doing all that heroic effort in what was the second major leak we've had this season. I heard talking to the homeowner and neighbor this afternoon that CAL FIRE also showed up and did a great job, as did PG&E. And so, you know, we appreciate their response if you have contacts that you're talking to. There's still, this is a minor thing, sort of, but there's still tree debris out on West Haven. You know if PG&E is going to come back and take care of that, or are we I mean, like, who's responsible for cleaning that up?
Good question. I think there's a culture in Humboldt County where, you know, the tree falls on public right of way. There's, you know, tree wood pirates that'll come and pick it up, right? Okay. So I don't know this particular case as a fact, but I do know that tree, those remnants of those trees are in the county right. So ultimately, it will be the county's responsibility to handle. How PG&E handles that, I'm not 100% sure. If they don't take ownership or responsibility for it. They got their equipment back up, and what's left is left. So I believe I spoke with the homeowner that's across the street from there, Renata, I believe, and she said she had reached out to the county at my recommendation. She not heard back just yet.
Okay. All right. Maybe we can kind of, we'll keep an eye on that and see what we can do to help. I
wanted to make a comment. I just am so impressed with you and the Public Works. I mean, you guys are real cowboys. You know, going out there at Easter weekend all night. Cold. Was it raining as well?
No, but it was getting colder in the evening.
No.
It couldn't have been better, actually.
Really, it's remarkable. But I did want to ask a question that's only tangentially, which has to do with water. I didn't notice anything in the agenda for today about a comment about the feasibility study, and I just wonder, it's tangentially related, but if you have anything you can update where we are with that. I know a lot of people are interested.
Yes, an item of highly anticipated discussion topic. And I touched on it. I was planning to touch on the staff activity report. If you would like me to touch on it now, we could do that. Or we could wait for agenda items.
Okay.
Yeah, whichever you prefer.
Let's hold for the staff report.
Okay.
Just
Today,
if you don't want, today's.
oh, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, that's okay. Just so we can stay focused on this for a minute because we're getting close to that. Thank you.
Gabe, just out of curiosity, I'm not a math person, but I'm just curious. Can anybody tell me roughly how much 40,000 gallons of water is worth, like it's creating.
Yeah, yeah, so let's see, just some quick math, so.
Is that bottled water?
40,000
Over half.
gallon,
Still sparkling.
40,000 divided by 7.48 is cubic feet. That's 5,347 cubic feet. So, without saying exactly who, that is about the amount of water that our largest consumer, that's actually just slightly less than what our largest consumer consumed this month. I would say a water bill of that nature is about $300-400.
The pipe that was damaged, that was concrete asbestos,
Yes.
and has the clamp that's been put on, is that considered a permanent repair or is that a temporary?
Not by me, but because the break was so clean, our contractors with a lot of experience believe that it would be a reasonable fix in this particular situation. If there were cracks in the pipe, no way. Wouldn't even think about it. But the photograph I shared with you in the staff report,
Yeah,
it was a really nice break. And I believe that we may not, on that weekend, have the right couplers to cut it and put it back together. Because we had some pieces that we could have used, but the clamp was the quickest go-to given the circumstances, and water was continuing to run. You still couldn't get the water to stop completely. It was down to about maybe 25% of the pressure that we like to see in those lines, anywhere between 40 and 50 PSI. But we were able to fix it. So the clamp worked, and it's not something that I'm comfortable with in the long term by any means. In fact, I was trying to figure out a way to put a hydrant in it, just break it open, stand up a hydrant at that particular point right then and there. But it's just appropriate.
One last question. In one of your transmissions, I noticed you were struggling and you were really concerned about the neighbors and you were talking about possibly activating the community emergency response team. Did we ever have to do that, or?
There you go. This would have been a nice opportunity. I will say this though, the folks on West Haven Drive who were affected, they're pretty rugged. I didn't hear a whole lot from them. I think I reached out to them more than they reached out to me. The CERT team would have been a nice gesture to go door to door, but some of those driveways are also kind of up and long and deep into the woods. They're not just, house calls, not one door to the next. So I was actually very impressed, and I thought maybe all the phone lines and cell lines were up, out, because I felt that the phone should have been ringing off the hook. But the folks that I was calling, just nice, warm calls, because I happen to have them in my phone, and I know them personally. I was calling them, and they were very kind to us, very quiet. So under different circumstances, I think we would have had to really needed to mobilize the CERT team door to door to make sure, like if it was a town outage here. I think the folks over at West Haven are pretty rugged.
Yeah. Good job, Gabe.
Anything else from the council?
Well, just to reiterate the thanks to staff and everybody who worked so hard on the situation, especially on a holiday. Yeah, good work.
With that, I'd like to, thank you. I'd like to open to public comments regarding the water leak. Okay, I don't see any questions or comments from the public, so I'll bring it back to the council. There's no action. This is accepting of the report. So with that, then I guess we'll move on to our next item, which is the continued discussion decision regarding the Edward Street crosswalk safety improvements. I'm going to turn it. You're back on the. Spotlight's back on you.
This is a good. another highly anticipated discussion now. So the recommendation, yeah, it's just a recommendation. And to conclude the Edward Street traffic safety improvement discussion from February and September of 2025. So to review the information, share observations, decide whether to remove the flashing beacon signage installed as designed and recommended by the city engineer. So my wishful thinking is that we've had a couple discussions about this, and we're at a point now where the grant has closed out in December, I believe. We received the final and only, I think, one payment, just a little over $630,000 to close out the grant. And back in September, that is what we, as a council, I guess, should say, the thought was we would wait until that reimbursement was received, and then we picked that conversation up again. So to recap, the Everett Street HSIP road safety improvements were discussed at length in January and February by the city council. Of particular concern to the nearby neighbors were the flashing beacon pedestrian crosswalk signs installed at Edwards and Hector and at Galindo Street as part of the safety enhancement designed by city engineer Josh Wolf, GHD. Wolf did not recommend removing any of the safety elements, but he suggested modification, alternatives, and associated costs. The insurer, CIRA, the city's insurer, recommended the city maintain design immunity to avoid exposure in the event of a future traffic incident involving a pedestrian at a crosswalk. Former city manager Joe Tagliabashi was tasked with finding an engineer to a different engineer by this council to see if a different engineer could make another recommendation, such as removing the signs and maybe evaluating the whole crosswalk and determining there was enough safety enhancements made, or evaluating the circumstances, such as the speed limits and so on and so forth. Maybe even some traffic data that would suggest that the full Monty, let's call it, that was imposed by our city engineering staff at these intersections could be pared down a little bit. After many months of discussions with former city manager, that engineer decided to cut bait and run. He says, I can't do this. I think his insurance company may have refused to cover him, if he overruled the traffic engineers at GHD or continued to work with this project, finding a different solution for this project. So in September, former city managers informed the council that staff was unable to find an engineer that would provide an alternative to GHD's recommendations. The city was expecting our $630,000 reimbursement. Any substantial project modification prior to receiving reimbursement would put the project at risk. So here we are today, and what we'd like to consider, what we'd like to offer to you to consider, since this project was to come back to you at a time appropriate once the reimbursements were received. I've offered in the staff report a couple of, a little bit of an analysis, some food for thought that you can maybe use at your disposal when weighing the merits of the removal or leaving or removing one or two of these, or one or both of these intersection signage. And in the staff report, just as a reminder, I took the photographs that were embedded in the document on Sunday night. So there's a photograph of people pressing the button, crossing crosswalk. There was no traffic, but they still are trained to press the button. So a couple of different risks, exposures that you are facing, could potentially face with removal. First one is the legal exposure. So although CIRA, our risk managers, did not advise removing the safety enhancements designed by our city engineer, they do not explicitly state that the crosswalks would be excluded from coverage should an accident occur. The only temporary coverage exclusion that I have ever experienced working with the city of Trinidad was due to the existence of failed improvements on the Van Wyck Trail. So, intentionally removed coverage as an exclusion in the event there was an accident there. And it was because improvements that were left on the trail, exposed nails, it's like humans touched it, but then they abandoned it. Right? So that exclusion was lifted by our JPA when the repairs were made and adequate signage was posted. Removing the crosswalk signs could increase the city's legal exposure in the event of a pedestrian accident. The main question being whether or not the city ignored a known safety risk, nuisance, or hazard. The financial risk. The council's been informed that removing the crosswalk signage would put the city at risk of having to potentially return $10,000 worth of signage. 20,000 if both intersections were abandoned. And Caltrans, and they didn't like it because they are expecting those improvements to be where we said they would be. So relocating them to a different location may lower this risk. The safety risks, the improvements were made to enhance safety for pedestrians crossing Everett Street after several years of feedback received from the community, project prioritization, public meetings, and council directions to staff to proceed with the project. Public comments were received in favor of the project from residents with disabilities, children, and challenges they face when trying to cross at peak traffic times. Removing the signage could pose a risk to their safety and could also increase the city's exposure to ADA Title II compliance lawsuits. Could, and I say it could, it's not should, not will, it just could. There's a risk. Of course, on the upside of this, there's a lot of benefits from removing these signs. So we've got a list of findings. Mayor Pro Tem Kenny here helped me with this, but they also, I think, were summarized in the prior meetings where we talked about public feedback has been received by the council and by the city, arguing that the conditions at these intersections do not warrant such dramatic safety improvements. They pollute the view shed and are out of character with the small town charm. So should the majority of the council contemplate removal of one or both sets of the RRFB crosswalk signs, the findings below listed in the staff report could be made in support of your decision. And there are 7 of them. The area has no significant traffic history or traffic incident history in general. And the speed limit is very low. City did not contact neighborhood residents directly, like we did with the Ocean Avenue in view. So the residents should have had an opportunity to weigh in, right? The city should have consistent standards of notification when neighborhoods stand to be affected by the plan change. The third thing is, in general, signage is heavily regulated under our local coastal plan. Edward Street afford views of the ocean to the south and west. The city should be cognizant of protecting such views from sign pollution where possible and reasonable. State guidelines on the use of RRFBs, make them optional, not mandatory. Federal guidelines caution against overuse. I thought this was a really interesting point. Your President Kenny had research. Number 6, our insurer has stated the city will be covered on claims made from any accidents on Edward Street, regardless of the presence or absence of the signs. And then the 7th one, under California state statutes on design immunity, the city council decision is supported by substantial evidence that can supersede an engineer's. So those 7 findings, if this council decides to remove the signs, should be part of the motion. It should be accepted, some, all, maybe all. So the options before you tonight, obviously listen to public input. No change to the project is one option. No change to the project as designed. They conclude this discussion indefinitely, possibly. The second option is to direct staff to remove both sets of signs. And the third option would be to direct staff to remove one set. So with that, I'm happy to turn it back over to the council.
All right, thank you. I have one quick question. Have we been able to get usage data from either of the sites?
I really tried. I tried so hard. We were trying, Kyle and I were trying, but we could not crack the interface on that. And I was really excited to get that data off that sign. There's an app, they call it an activation clock.
Okay.
And I would really love to have that data regardless of what happens tonight. We tried. I mean,
No worries. I had a feeling it would be complicated. I just thought,
Try.
I just wanted to point that out, that we had talked about this last time.
yeah, I think once we get into that thing with that user interface, with an app and so on and so forth, that
Then you'll be able to.
it's a localized network that we can utilize. Doesn't require Wi-Fi, but it takes a 10-foot ladder, 2 staff to be there, 1 person to get up on the ladder to enter into the control box, and then you got to press buttons. You got to sit around and wait. It's a little bit of a process, and unfortunately, despite our best efforts in the last 2 days, it's anything to get that.
Not so easy. Okay, thank you. Other questions or comments from the?
Quick question, Kate, can they be reused?
They most certainly can, yes.
And what is the cost factor with that?
I think wherever they're used, it needs to be very intentional. So primary cost is not necessarily going to be installation. It's going to be the process by which we hire our engineering staff to make sure that they're placed in the appropriate locations, they're protected. You know, you can't just put a sign in the middle of the sidewalk. You know, you got to put it in a very strategic way. Mainly because if there was ever an incident, as if anyone's been in a traffic accident or fought a ticket in court, you know, if a sign's just slightly too low, or if a sign's too deep into an intersection, it's not appropriately marked according to the I think it's an acronym for highway, streets, and safety codes, California specific. It's
So
it
those
makes the defense very difficult. So
those
that
elements
time.
would have to be considered.
Yeah.
As I'm thinking about my position and my reluctance is the waste, which I think is true for us. On the negative side, it's like wasting all that money. So if they can be reused, it just it's a lot more palatable. And another question, I would ask the engineer when he was here, why we couldn't just take those signs down and put up stop signs. And I think he said it was not legal because there were stop signs a block away or something. But that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound like a law that anybody would have made. But do you know anything?
You know, for whatever reason, all of the staff members this week were on vacation at GHD, and I tried to reach them, and I would love for Josh to be here right now tonight. And I don't know that question, but I do recall that discussion.
Yeah.
And again, it probably boils down very clearly to some of the transportation standards by which laws are protected for.
Well, when I see him again, I can ask again, but just in terms of protecting that intersection.
Yeah.
And stop signs are short.
There is one stop sign there coming off, that Ewing, no, not Ewing Street, but wherever the church is, that there's a stop sign there.
Hector.
Yeah, Hector, thanks. And then it seems like there should be, I mean, the big hiccup on this whole thing, of course, is the legal liability. You know, we don't want to open ourselves to some lawsuit like that. So perhaps we can perhaps we can provide some signage. And I like that term, signage pollution. Was that yours? Wherever they came.
I didn't make it up.
Okay. And I'm against signage pollution, but I think what I'm just wondering here, a small sign that says to the pedestrians that are about to cross through the crosswalk, proceed with extreme caution due to the fact that this is a busy traffic area, and then take those other obnoxious things down, but still be able to cover ourselves from a legal liability standpoint. That makes sense.
Well, maybe. I, I think, I think the painted crosswalks themselves are enough of a safety improvement that, we would be kind of a risky position if we take down the flashing beacons because we have 7 findings that would meet the standard for what's called substantial evidence, which is a pretty low standard. So we would get the design immunity if anybody, God forbid, would get injured there and decide that aside from the other driver, who obviously would probably be primarily at fault. I mean, when you hit somebody who's in a crosswalk, that's pretty much on you. But sometimes they look around for other defendants and if, but I think we would have the design immunity. We would not be in a risky situation.
I think that one up on Hector Street, that's the one that's the problem, the one that's further down by the Marine Center, the Marine Laboratory. I think that's a good one there. I think that one, I often walk that way, and I think that's worth keeping in there. It's kind of a dangerous situation. I think that Link Curve as you come up over the hill there. But the one up on Hector, I think it's just an eyesore, and it's just, one of the most beautiful sites in Trinidad, looking out over Trinidad Bay like that. So from an aesthetic standpoint, I would like to see that one removed.
If they can be reused, one place that I think they really are needed is on Trinity and was that where West, right there by the eatery. I don't know how many times that I've almost, I had to back up to get back on the sidewalk. I'm barreling down there. And there's crosswalk mark, but it's not doing anything.
Yeah, and that's a good example of a place where we might decide is more appropriate for it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we should abandon, the signs as a resource that could be used in an appropriate location around Trinidad. Just saying that I don't think where they were installed is the appropriate location, but we can keep them and if we want to explore other locations, like Gabe said, we can bring our engineering staff in and see what they can do for us in that regard. And we're totally not going to throw them away. Get them down. And then, as far as the one further down the hill, I see what you mean by, people coming up the hill in particular don't have a good view around the corner until they get around the corner and see if anybody's crossing the street. But I think that can be remedied by moving the crosswalk a little further up the hill to give them more stopping time in case there is somebody in the crosswalk.
Yeah,
Because there was not even a crosswalk there for 50 years or whatever.
right.
And nobody got hit, crossing the street there. So I understand things have increased traffic, more in the modern times.
Yeah, and I've only, I walk the dog twice a day, and so I have a lot of experience, as Henry does, out there on the streets here lately. And some of the stuff you see out there, I'm surprised we don't have more accidents than we do. I mean, I don't think we have any accidents to speak of, but there's some crazy things going on out there with people riding bicycles and walking their dogs at the same time, and then an oncoming car is coming, and everybody's running every which way. And
I agree 100%.
Yeah, so I guess I agree with John, and I said this, I think the last time we discussed this, so I'm just going to throw out my opinion is still that we remove that we split the difference here, and we remove the one on Hector and keep the one down by the Marine Lab, and just, my reasoning is that this, these were put in place by, through traffic engineering study, and they did look at what made sense. They did look at what made sense from their perspective, and the council voted to install these. At the time, I thought we should only do one. I thought two was a lot for Edwards. And then if I were going to go down this path, I'd say we revisit it and, when we have the data. And if the signal's not being used on Hector, then maybe we would move that one as well. But in the absence of the data that says one's being used more than the other, or that they're being used a lot or not at all, I see people using them. And the Marine Lab specifically, that crossing was the one that the school seemed to really believe was useful for the little kids when I don't know how often they use it, but so that's just my opinion. So it sounds like we have varying opinions on the council. Unless there are more questions or comments from the council, though I do want to go to public comment. Did you want to add anything? I want to point out that the council did receive a letter, if you had a chance to read it, and this is in support of removing both of the crosswalks. And this is from 11 to 12 households, and it looks like maybe 18 to 19 individuals. So, and there are various arguments in here in support of removing them. So with that, I'd like to open to public comments if you have anything maybe to add in addition to this, because we are in receipt of the letter and understand the kind of the arguments. So please.
I'm the medium. I live at 833 Edwards, and I see John walking every day, and I presume he sees me. The problem that, I think we can understand that the lights were a glaring solution to a non-existent problem. There was no traffic study to determine whether those lights should be placed or if they should be placed. The problem I see with the one, I agree totally, is that the one on Hector should be removed. The problem I have with the one on Marine Lab is that if you've ever driven a boat up there and pulled up the hill, you have to gun it to get up the hill. So you gun it to get up the hill, and what do? You just make the blind turn, and supposedly you're supposed to slam on the brakes for somebody using that crosswalk. Crossing that street every day, I always cross significantly up from the existing crosswalk, simply because I know that where they located it is absolutely dangerous. It makes no sense. But I agree that you don't have to have lights to have a safe crosswalk. There are thousands of crosswalks throughout Humboldt County that don't have glaring lights that nobody considers a hazard. Having been a plaintiff's attorney, the first thing I always looked through if I was suing Caltrans was, is there a prior accident history? And there is no prior accident history. There just isn't. You'd have a difficult time claiming that this is an unsafe condition when you had never had a prior accident.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Other public comments?
I'll try and keep this brief. Aaron Haven at 3 View Avenue, and I'm in support of removing both sets of signs. I'll start by saying this: I have one regret as a planning commissioner, and this is it. This is the only project I voted for that I did not fully understand, and that's on me as a planning commissioner for not understanding this, but this was a miss. That solution is not appropriate for the problem that we have. I love the crosswalks. I think the safety enhancement for that is great. I absolutely respect the argument about a location there. I personally as well don't cross down that low, but this was a miss. I think we should do the right thing and remove them. I'm not fixing the mistake because it's difficult or inconvenient, or we're concerned about waste is, I think, a bad path to head down. If there's a concern about wasting the signs and we can't relocate them in town, I guarantee you there's an aftermarket for this product. I guarantee that. People sell used fire engines because places can't afford to pay retail, just like a car, buy a used car, right? So there's a way to recoup that cost. Keep it simple tonight. I'm hearing lots of great ideas about ways to tweak and feel comfortable with this, but I encourage Are we removing them or are we not removing them? That sounds like the decision point that you feel like you're at. So let's have that discussion. And then later on, we can have more discussion about where something should be, how something else could be improved. There are 7 very well-written findings in here in support of removal. I'd encourage you to really lean into those and think about those. I think they provide the city deal from liability to concern, and everything has liability, right? Our trails have liability, our roads have, I mean, we can't be afraid of everything. I would just end by saying, maybe just anecdotally from my profession, right? Signs don't stop bad drivers, they don't stop bad behavior, right? But you can put as many signs as you want. People are still going to run red lights, they're still going to run crosswalks, they're still going to do all these bad things that are what cause these accidents, right? We've made a great step here by putting these crosswalks in to improve safety, but those blinking signs, they're just not appropriate for you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Jeff Baird, I live at 829 Empress, and I appreciate this forum and this discussion. You know my positions because I have been in front of you several times back in January and February, support for those meetings, and September one as well. Gabe recapped a lot of what I was going to say, so I'll only maybe hit some of the highlights. These are 14-foot tall, 8 square feet fletching orange things that are very ugly, and they ruin the views both to the south over the bay and to the west over the ocean. John walks by my house every day. I see him, as does Bryce. And you cannot, from my front yard, look that direction and not see those orange signs. It's right sitting there in front of the ocean. It's like they're right there. They're not small. They're not inoffensive. There has never been a traffic study done on Edwards, so no one knows whether those things were ever needed and were ever to be done. The idea that this area would be unsafe if we were to remove them is just nonsensical. If it wasn't unsafe to begin with, why would it be unsafe if we removed them? Councilmember Kenny directly asked Josh Wolf, was that area unsafe without these signs? And he wouldn't say that. He said, it's safer with these signs. Well, that'd be true if you could put, a traffic signal there or a railroad crossing arm or something. You can always make something safer if you make it bigger and bigger and bolder and more flashy. Back in January and February, when we had these consecutive meetings, there was a lot of input, much more than you're hearing tonight from the community, with the exception of the letter that I heard you guys just discussing about the 1782 people. In those last 2 meetings, there were 18 voices heard, both by emails to you or by people coming up and speaking. And if you're keeping track of who was for and who was against, I was. The breakdown was 13 said remove them all, and 5 said keep them. That's 72% to 27%. That's a 45% swing. It's not close. The community wants these things gone, and not just one of them. They want them both. And this is democracy, and normally when there's a landslide, the democracy voices should be heard. And I guess my final comments are what Gabe said. We're not going to lose our insurance coverage. We're not going to lose our design immunity under the government code if the city's person that's responsible for discretionary approval follows through with getting that work done. There has never been an accident there. The 3 options that are at the end of the staff report are basically the same things that Josh Wolf said at the last meetings. Make them a little bit smaller, move them back a little bit. Oh, we can reposition the 14-foot tall thing that provides the electricity, make them run. Those things were rejected then. Those 3 options were not well options. They are rejected then and should be rejected now. The signs need to be removed, both of them. Both Fernando and Hector, they're unnecessary and eyesore. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments, please.
Hi everyone, Anna from Hector Street. I've been joining these for a while now. Thank you Gabe for putting that together. That was very thorough. I just wanted to briefly mention goodwill. We live in a very small community, and I think that these were conceived with goodwill. They may not have been presented to the community quite as thoroughly as they should have been, ultimately. But I think that if we think of this community as a group of people wanting to enjoy the environment and to stay safe and support each other, then we can assume that drivers don't want to hit pedestrians, right? People want to see the view, they want to enjoy the beach. We don't really have the conditions for crashes, and that is a beautiful straight street that you can see people coming up on. And they really just don't have the speed or the drug use to justify that would create the crashes that tend to happen. There are conditions that cause pedestrian deaths that just don't exist in this town. Now, we put a bar at the harbor that was open to its way out, we might have to revisit this conversation. But I just would like to thank you guys for considering removing both of them. I think that would be a great gesture of goodwill to those of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, we're continuing with comments regarding the crosswalks.
Good evening, council. My name is Chris Slay. I live at 692 Underwood, and I'm going to lose some friends in the room tonight because I adore these signs. And I adore these signs for the same reason that my kids adore these signs, because they're empowering. My kids love pushing the buttons on the signs scattered around town. I think they're frankly too short. You can see the flashing lights, but they know that, like I do, when drivers see those flashing lights, they bend to our will and have to stop for us. I mean, they have to stop for us regardless, right? It's our legal right to cross these intersections. But the lights enhance our safety. And I mean, there's lots of opinions floating around tonight. I want to share one factual anecdote, which is that, maybe drunk on the sense of empowerment. I was crossing the streets, pushing a stroller several months ago. And right around sunset, a driver was approaching too quickly. So I stopped crossing and I watched as the passenger pointed and said, I could read her lips. She said, "It's flashing." And at that moment, the driver applied brakes and stopped. And, it almost sounds unbelievable, right? But it was in fact true. And it really highlights another issue here that people haven't mentioned, which is that Edwards runs due east-west. So for somewhere between 30 and 50% of the year, the sun is setting within a 15-degree azimuth of the streets, which has the potential to blind drivers. So, thinking back to some of the previous comments, the drivers can be blinded by the sun. People don't want to hit pedestrians, but they also have to see pedestrians to avoid. So anywho, I have stood in front of the planning commission before arguing about detriments to our view shed. So I know that that's an issue that is taken very seriously around town, as it should be. But frankly, these signs make our community safer. They make my children safer, and I certainly can't lobby against them from that standpoint. What I will say, which now is an opinion, is that for the folks who think that this is out of character for our community, I'll just say that I don't think there's any more distinguishing character in Trinidad than it's walking the way. And I know that because I see many of the council members walking routinely. And so I think from that perspective, any enhancement to the safety of pedestrians does in fact bolster perhaps the greatest thing Trinidad has going for it, which is its walking the way. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comments, please.
My name's Pete Alcorn. I live at 806 Edwards. I can't see this sign from my living room window. I see the other. Yeah. And so it's on at night. Boop, boop, boop. Nobody wants to see bright blinking lights from them. It is out of keeping with this, and I think it's totally, and I do think that they're totally unnecessary. That the road that comes up Edwards, you're going around an S turn. Everybody's going pretty slowly. You've got plenty of time to stop. There's a zebra crossing. If there's somebody in the zebra crossing, you have to stop. That's the with it. And if you're coming down Edwards, you have 300 yards of clear view to that crosswalk. So I like the fact that there's a zebra crossing there. That's great. Does there need to be a sign No, it's ugly. It's horrible. We hate it. I don't know anybody who looks at that who's not like faced with it every minute day that doesn't go, ooh. It's the same thing really when, you know, you have the no parking signs. Don't want somebody to park, you paint the curb red. That everybody understands. Instead, you don't put up a big ugly sign in people's that everyone has to look at and just makes the whole neighborhood ugly. I like signs. I especially don't like these signs. They're horrible. I hope they go away. Thanks.
Thank you. I can't see if anybody online has their hand raised for comments. Otherwise, I think if not, Mr. Davis, Andrew, you have your hand raised?
Yes, thank you for
Yeah.
a moment to speak. I think, you know, I wanted to point out a couple things about the financial costs that Gabe raised. It's not just the financial cost to the city, it's also the financial cost to the homeowners. Myself and my neighbor down the hill believe that our ability, should we sell the house, would be significantly hampered by these signs. So while the city is considering the cost to just themselves, I think they should also consider the cost to the homeowners. Secondarily, there could be a financial cost to the town if the signs don't come down. So that's another thing to consider. And that's something that has been communicated quietly, but I believe in this instance needs to be communicated publicly. So please consider those two things as you consider taking not just one, but both of these signs down. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? See anyone online or in the room? So I'm going to bring it back to the council. Any further questions, or the chair would entertain a motion?
Well, the only other thing I was going to state is that one down there by the Talonaker Marine Laboratory, you know, they bring a lot of college students in up there, and you know, that parking lot fills up with cars, and I'm not sure which way their students make their way down to the beach, or if they do, for that matter. But it might be worth checking with Talonaker, the people there at Talonaker, to see if what their thoughts are on keeping that particular sign there.
John, if I may, I'm there, I watch the students when they park up on Edwards.
Yeah.
Honestly, if the parking lot's full, the
Mhm.
only place they can park is on Edwards, but it's always on the uphill side. And just walk straight down and go right into the parking area. There's no parking on the other side, which would necessitate the need for a crosswalk. And students. I mean, you track what I'm saying?
Yeah, they park on Ewing Street there, right?
No, they park on Edwards, but they park on the north side of the road. So they have to just walk straight down.
Oh, I see what you're saying, to the laboratory.
Turn right. I mean, it's not like they're parking on the south side of the road because that's all red curved. They can't park there.
Yeah, I was thinking, Jeff, that they were going down from the laboratory down to the pier, and how they were crossing.
They generally walk right down that curve,
Yeah,
like all the tourists do.
and I don't think that's
Intersection for anyone.
I'm sorry, I can't have, I'm gonna have to,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I
sorry.
apologize.
No, that's okay. I would need to reopen public comments and have you come to can hear you online. And, I think the point was made that maybe getting feedback from them was.
Yeah, and strictly from a safety standpoint, I don't, you know, walking down that curve, going down to the pier that way is not a safe situation. And I'm not sure the signs improve the safety situation, you know, but
Well, this is a little bit, you know, we've been talking about this for a while, so I think
Yeah.
we need to, I don't mean tonight, I mean over the last several months, so we need to kind of close this out. I'm personally a little frustrated that we weren't able to do some of the, you know, creative ideas that the council came up with, like, you know, lights that would go across the road or, you know, different things. But we are where we are. So.
Well.
If you want to, I could tell that you were.
First of all, I'd like to thank Chris for standing up and giving a dissenting opinion. And I'll be your friend, Chris, don't worry. Over this, because dissenting opinions are important. this particular case, it did not persuade me to change my viewpoint. But it was a very interesting point to me about the east-west orientation of Edward Street. And Main Street is the same way. And I've noticed that many times that at certain times of the year, it's very difficult to see it all if you're driving down the street at sunset. And what I do when that happens is I slow way down because it's, and I hope that nobody's in front of me, because basically for a couple of seconds you can't see anything at all. And then luckily it's a brief period of time, and then you can make sure nobody's there. And that's just something that's kind of hardwired into the way our city was laid out at some point. Not a whole lot we can do about it. I'm not sure that the flashing lights would even be visible, for that couple of seconds when the sun is really getting in your eyes. But I also would have to agree and emphasize that there was no traffic study done before the beacons were put up. There was a paper process, and there was a little bit of outreach to the community, and a few people made that suggestion. That's as far, that's much different than a real traffic study, where they look at how many cars go down the hill and all that kind of stuff.
They did, however, I thought he did a safety analysis.
Yeah, there's some kind of, there's a paper process. There was a paper process, and part of that was reaching out to the residents for ideas. And a couple of people did suggest, those kind of improvements. And I'm not, not all due respect to Josh Wolf, he's a good engineer. And everybody involved, the prior council that passed that and everything. The thing that really made me rethink this was when, I realized it's kind of like a neighborhood thing. It's the people that live down there, that's their neighborhood. They didn't get the same opportunity that my street got to comment about the aesthetic changes that were going to come about by the safety measures that were put in to slow the cars down on Ocean Avenue. And, we got to treat all neighborhoods the same. And I think it's not far enough of a done deal that we can't go back now and say we're gonna rewind a little bit, take these signs down, leave the crosswalks. And I might add, one way to substantially ameliorate the situation with pedestrians down the street is to reopen the Van Wyck Trail, make it reasonably easy to walk on. You can get a lot of people off of Edward Street using a beautiful scenic trail that affords a nice overlook of the bay and down towards Camel Rock and everything. So that's something we should be considering also. So I still think we should take them all down. And we can look then at, a little miniature man holding up a little sign that I see by the school. Hey, that's
Slow, it's a little slow man.
yeah, that might be enough right there before the blind corner to remind people, oh yeah, there's a crosswalk.
So do you want to, did you,
This corner.
was there a motion that you'd like to make then, Councilor Kenny? I feel that there's something coming, so.
I move that we take down, that we make all 7 findings that are mentioned in the staff report. And we take down both of the flashing beacon signs on Edward Street to be kept in a safe and usable condition for possible further placement in alternative locations that do not have the same aesthetic concerns that we have down on Edward Street.
All right, thank you. And is there a second to the motion?
Are you going to replace it with the little guys?
I'll leave that up to Public Works.
Okay.
At this point, something like that is certainly no harm in putting it out there. They can't be very expensive.
Okay.
And
They're so cute.
say they're cute and, you know.
Okay, sure. We have a motion. We have a motion.
Okay, and then I'll second that idea. That sounds good if you put the little guys up.
Second, and all those in favor? Those opposed? No. I still believe we should keep one, so, but I see that it's gonna pass, so I'm comfortable with that. Thank you, everyone. This has been a challenging one.
It has.
Yeah, and thank you, members of the public, for sticking with us, and hopefully we get to where the majority of folks, at least that have commented, wanted to go. All right, with that, I'm going to move us on to item number 6, which is the staff activity report for March 2026. I think we posted this afternoon. Yeah. And I know that Katie, I wanted to capture that Katie had a question of the water study. Let's start there.
It was in there.
Yeah, let's start with that. I format a little bit. I just listed a bunch of bullet points. I can go over a couple of them that I believe are highlights, but starting with the feasibility study discussion. We had several meetings this month. They were very interesting meetings. We met with our state drinking water funding representative, and she was able to give us some very enlightening and optimistic insights as to some of the paths that we can take utilizing state resources to get the information we're looking for in terms of the comparative analysis. And we also have been reached out to by almost, there was a cold call from an engineering company who knew of our needs. They specialize in hydrology, they specialize in public water systems, and offered to be of assistance. So the two calls, meetings combined gave us the direction that we need to put together an agenda item for you. And we hope, we believe we can do it next month. But there could be some developments behind the scenes, I guess, with some of the litigation issues that we're handling that could take a precedent to that. So we're not entirely sure. I'm hesitant to commit whether or not this is going to be a May meeting agenda or a June. But we also have some pretty heavy budget lifting to do in May. So there's a little bit of nexus.
We can have another leak.
They can have another leak. Yeah, certainly. You never know. So with that said, that is coming back to you. We do have some clarity now that we've been looking for that is going to be it's going to make our job easier to provide you with what you need to make a very educated and informed decision about the path moving forward. So other than that, kind of going back to March, the first 2 weeks of March was dedicated to our meeting and a focus on the January 3rd gross incident water leak and routine follow-up from that meeting. The city versus ancestral study lawsuit also began that week. So those first 2 weeks of March were pretty much meeting and trial, of which myself and several other staff members, I think Mayor Pro Tem Kenny and Mayor Kelly were also called to the courthouse. So that was our first half of March. And then the rest of the month was, I'll read it specifically. The rest of the month was filled with challenges and problem-solving hours dedicated to fulfilling the needs of the community, ongoing commitments, partnerships, and projects, including a big one that's consumed almost Angela's full-time existence with the city for the last, I don't even know how long, probably too long, is the emergency intertie. We are still trying to bring that project to the finish line, and we're hopeful we can get there very soon, within the next few days. There's been a mildew outbreak as a result of possibly some heavy content of moisture in the building that consumed and bloomed, and there's no ventilation in the building. So, of course, as you can imagine, our engineering team is scrambling to figure out, what those next steps are, because construction deadline is tomorrow. So everything we're doing now is in preparation of closing out the books so that we can begin closing out the grant and finishing the last few steps. In the interim, we're hustling to remediate the mildew issue, come up with some mechanical and non-mechanical solutions to keep that place vented so that it will not deteriorate with the quickness. There's hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of electrical equipment in that small 9x9 building that we're very sensitive to. So just cash flow and investments, we moved quite a bit of money. So these are the things that can oftentimes be overlooked when you're so consumed with other problems and projects and priorities. You know, you got to make sure your money is in the right place. You got to manage your cash flow needs. Our grants are pretty much, our big grants are coming to a conclusion. So we're able to put money back into our investment accounts, which we've successfully done this month. We had a couple of wildlife encounters. As some of you may or may not know, we had a mountain lion that took the life of 3 harmless little goats up on Langford Road, and Mr. Blaskowitz over here captured them on his home security system first, about 4 days earlier. So we learned that that mountain lion had helped himself to the community, or herself, wandering through the town. And I was lucky enough to, through the wildlife incident reporting system that the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has, I learned with a quick call to that office in Eureka that I could file a report. And I got a call back from a woman named Kiana Nova, who is apparently Humboldt County's wildlife guru. And she knew everything everything I needed to know about mountain lions, their behavior. She forwarded us some outreach, which I believe I sent that email out to the council and other staff members that included bears as well. So when the bears wake up from hibernation, I guess there's been a little bit of a competition for food out there during the hibernation ending months. That's when cats get excited, and when they don't have any punishment, they'll come back. So she offered some really exciting, silliest things you can imagine, like sprinkler systems that are on a sensor, and a big cat walking around, even a squirt of water, they don't like it, you know, and that's punishment. So
bad kitty.
Yeah, bad kitty. So yeah, it's kind of exciting. But we learned some really cool things from Kiana. I'm so grateful that people like her exist in this community, specialists that we can turn to at times. And you also have an opportunity when you file a wildlife report like that, where they will give you permission to impose lethal circumstances on that particular nuisance. But the person on Langford Road did not want that. And they also don't go and track these cats. You know, they don't go around unless something is unless a human, there's a really bad human encounter. So some people are like, is somebody gonna call the wildlife department? They're gonna send a tracker up to sniff them out and kill them. That's not the case. That does not happen. We informed our new leaders in town. We've got one new leader. And I highlighted that as segment there because we have a new Trinidad Coastal Land Trust director. And anytime somebody new comes in, they get excited and they have all these wonderful ideas, and then you got to put out the fire, you know, sometimes, you know, and it's really unfortunate to be in that position. But Dave Farrell is a very he's very knowledgeable and very excited new leader in Trinidad, and he had some ideas about developing the pasture that the land trust currently owns and is trying to figure out how to get water to that pasture. In a way, maybe that's a little less straightforward than just putting a connection like anyone else would have to do. So we've had some discussions with Dave about that, but had several meetings with the new Trinidad Coastal Land Trust director. We handled some complaints. We ended up handling a damage claim as a result of the scenic drive week. There was some roadway washouts down below driveways, shared driveways that had some pretty significant erosion. And a little bit of movement, subsidence under a house that had to be leveled. So we have currently processed a damage claim that is with our insurer, CIRA, at the moment for processing and review. And when CIRA makes their determination on whether or not the damage claim has substantial evidence to support or dismiss, you will be notified of that in the form of an agenda item to either accept or reject the claim. I believe it's just under $20,000 in damages, and the city currently has a $5,000 self-insured deductible, which it will have to cough up if any, all, or most of that claim is accepted. And you will be given a recommendation by CIRA as to whether to accept. Months. And one thing that could compromise our self-insured retention, our deductible, it could raise it to $15,000, is if we do not attend one of the CIRA meetings, because we are a member of that JPA. And every entity has to attend at least once per year. They have their meetings in May and December, and we did not attend the one in December. I believe Joe Tadlebashi may have attended the prior May. So I was trying to get out of it really bad to attend this meeting at the end of May. Or I think it's the middle of May, right after our council meeting, maybe like a day or two after. But unfortunately, we either have to hand them a check for $10,000 in case anything happened, or we attend. So I'm planning to attend. It's about a 2-day affair in Sacramento. I guess our little vote counts even in Sacramento. Let's see, long range water planning. Okay, that was what we talked about with regards to the feasibility study coming up. Community engagement, no Kings, what do they call it, a protest or a parade? I guess it was a parade or a protest.
Yeah.
So we provided some staff coordination for that, including public works, public safety team. I don't believe the sheriff attended, but our Pacific Coast Security did assist in the movement of people through town. LAFCO. Mayor Kelly, did you mention the LAFCO meeting in your?
I think I mentioned it last time.
Was that already LAFCO?
Yeah,
already?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we are happy to report. Yep. Yep. The two LAFCO, the two outside city water connections for by LAFCO. And now we're waiting for LAFCO's final stamp of approval before we then mobilize our crews to install the water connections. And, you know, sometimes in these cases, if we don't install the water connection right away, it doesn't mean that the right goes away, but we will be hoping and we will be encouraging these folks who we have assisted through this long, tedious process to complete the project. Let's see. Very good. See. CSA 4 long range planning, that'll be my last thing. There's a few other things on this list, but I wanted to let you know that we're the fire department and I are concluding our work on that preliminary information gathering that the consultant with that was hired by LAFCO and this small CSA group made up the city, West Haven, the county, and the Trinidad Rectory. We will be submitting those documents to the state. To LAFCO here. Those are my highlights. There's a lot of stuff going on. But if you have any other questions, I'm here.
I know she mentioned the street lights were on, but any movement on them coming and fixing the street lights on PG&E coming? Have you even heard?
Yeah, they were very good at making us feel mad.
Yeah.
They sent their one of two, I guess, regional vice presidents up here, one of which lives in the area. They sent him up.
Oh.
I'm sorry, his name escapes me right now, but Allison Talbot, the government affairs rep, she's our first line of contact for all cities and county representatives when it comes to matters of PG&E. both of them came up, we did a site, we walked around, we looked at every street light. Some of them had the tops were off. One of them, the top is off. It's over here by the school and the wires are hanging out. And of course, the vice president's looking at that like, we did that? You know, he was not happy with what he saw. But what it boils down to is some supply chain issues. According to what PG&E said, and the rapidness of which they are able to receive all the equipment needed to convert every one of our streetlights. And the trial one that they tried about a month ago worked, and they put an order for not just ours, but a lot of others. You know, they don't, PG&E doesn't order 5 things, they order 500 things. So that's where we're at with that. We're waiting for, I guess, a tanker to come from overseas with a bunch of new fittings for the top of all of our streetlights to be installed.
Okay, but at least they're working on it.
They are.
Cool. Other questions for Gabe on the staff report from the council?
No,
Oh, can I point one more thing out? We got some kind of a bummer news from our water operator, T3 Carl, who we sent his paperwork in to get certified, and the state sent a letter back saying that he owed another, he was due to pay another 1,800 hours. We thought was a little bit weird. I've heard from our former city manager that it was 1,800 hours plus your T3 license test certification. We heard from former operators at Coleman Engineering. We heard from our current operator. And we've heard from other agencies that it was a 1,800-hour rule, but according to the state, seem to be always moving the target just a little bit.
So they're asking for 36.
Asking for 3,600. So we got a letter last week saying, sorry, your application was received. However, 3,600 hours are due. It looks like you fulfilled 1,800, you owe another 1,800. That was really concerning. So we argued back. Luckily, Carl has a fisheries biology degree, which qualifies sort of in lieu of those 1,800 hours for 50% of those hours. So 750 hours, depending on how you do math. If it's a 20 to 40 hour period, however many 52 weeks in a year, I think we calculated it to be approximately. We're doing the calculation to be a few months. So we're also at a little bit of an intersection with Eric Sanders, who was the operator that was hired by former city manager Joe Tagliabashi, who we were excited to hire for a much lower price. But Eric is contemplating an employment opportunity, possibly in a management position at a city elsewhere from his current job, which could conflict with his ability to serve for us. So yeah. Just when you think you check the box for one problem, there's 5 more on the other side waiting for us. So we are scratching our heads right now, strategizing our new approach. And it just further underscores, I mean, we're a T3 plant. A lot of folks around us are T2 operators. You know, the level of certification needed to run this facility. West Haven, for instance, is a T2 plant. The level of experience and qualifications required to run this plant is, the state's not relaxing their experience requirements. They're just getting more and more severe. So that's a challenge that, and a headwind that we're going to continue to face in the current situation that we're in.
Okay, there's questions for Gabe? Any questions from the public on the staff report? Please.
All right, I just have one, Gabe. Sounds like maybe I missed the window, or the window's already passed for the streetlights in town. People already ordered what they're going to order, and they're going to be installed. The reason I'm bringing this up is also in your staff report, you mentioned the new lighting around post office. One's not just behind, there's also 6 lights, 2 on each side, in front and back, and it is remarkable. And I want to have a conversation with you separately about that. But I would advocate the city with any lighting that the city takes. We consider dark sky appropriate and shielded fixtures and that kind of stuff, because you just talked about intermittent blinking lights being a source of consternation. And we now have a new, so I mean, just let's be heads up and leading on this instead of having to react after something's already installed. It's like, ooh, gosh, that ended up being brighter. And
Do we want to talk about those lights behind the post office? Is that something for this? The reason,
Yeah, I think you can quickly.
yeah, so. You say, Aaron, that there were more than just the two? You said there were 6?
so there's the 2 light standards in the parking lot, and then on all 4 sides of the building, there are also maybe 2 on sides and 2 on the front and back.
On the post side.
On the post office building above.
Got it. Okay. So that was an odd one. The 2 tall lights in the back. I know about the ones that are attached to the building, right? They've been there, right? Those are existing, or those are new?
Those are new.
Yeah. So wow, there's a lot.
8 lights in that little footprint.
Yeah. So what I understand, I reached out to, as soon as I found out about those lights, I reached out to Murphy's Market owners. The owner did not know that those lights went up. The owner of the property, he leases it to the post office. Apparently, a work order went in a year ago from the postal workers saying it was dark back there. They felt unsafe at night in the winter. And a year later, federal government just sent a crew up here. They just attacked it. The owner of the property did not know about it. He says that he's ordered them, demanded them to take it down. I don't know how far he's going to get with that. But we have yet permit it. So we were waiting for Trevor to get back to make sure that any lighting over there, if there was any design criteria, a building permit would have to go through planning or a checkpoint before it can even get back to the building department for issuance. And that is in progress right now. The other buildings, the other lights on the building, I was not aware of, and I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, one. So we'll include that into the list. And then as far as the dark skies go, that is something I'm very much in favor of. But I've talked to Mayor Kelly about this before. We've been watching some. I think the county just passed an ordinance, and I think a couple other cities too. So it is something that I think is worth discussing, especially during the
should
budget.
check on this, because I thought those were dark sky compliant, those street lights,
That's what
but
I
they
thought,
point
too.
down. And you know, the whole, yeah, so we should just double check, make sure they're not already dark sky compliant. But then the other piece of that was that we had, I think I even drafted like a sample ordinance of what a dark sky ordinance might look like. So not just for the streetlights, but for residences, right? And businesses. But you know, people are pretty compliant. It's quite dark out there. But we should maybe take a look at it. So thank you for that. Other comments or questions on the staff report? All right, thank you. Very good report. Gabe, any future agenda items anybody want to tee up at the moment? Otherwise, send them to Gabe. All right, and then with that, I think we're adjourned. You can tell it's getting late. Yeah, you want